Welcome to week one of a brand new series that we're starting to today that's going to go for about 6 weeks. And listen, if it's your first time with us, today, man, you couldn't have picked a better Sunday to come, right? You're in on the beginning of this thing, right? That's awesome. Don't you love when you're like beta testers? Right? Enterprise is not the culture of beta testers. We like to know that it works before we jump in. But I'm telling you, you're going to be, man, I'm telling you, this series, it's like none other that we've done so far, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. But I really do believe that if you kind of hang with us over the next 6 weeks, man, I do believe that this series has the potential to change your life. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, right? Some of you, especially those of you who've been here forever, you're thinking, you say that about every single series. Right? And it's true. It's true. I say that about everyone because I do believe that they have a potential to change your life. Because if I didn't believe that it had the potential to change your life, then we just probably shouldn't do it. Right? You with me? You with me? So I do believe that this one has the potential to change your life, but it's different than what we normally do. What we normally do is kind of we're kind of a topical church. We kind of take something and we run with it for a couple of weeks and we kind of like the last series we were in, without a doubt. Right? So we took the idea, okay, that all of us have doubts. Okay, we're never going to be to the point where we don't have any doubts. So how do we figure out and deal with the doubts that we do have, and what can we hang on to that can help us when we start doubting all that stuff? Do you see what I'm saying? So we talk about relationships. So we have a relationship series. Talk about money. You have a financial series. That's kind of how we do things as a church, and this is brand new. We've never done this in the history of our church. So what we're doing in this series is we're not taking topics. We're taking a book of the Bible, and we're diving into the book of the Bible. So what we'll do is each week we'll take one chapter each week for the next 6 weeks, and we'll kind of pick out some stuff that I think kind of pertains to our life and some things that we can kind of grasp and hold on to that can change our hearts and that can move us closer in a relationship with Jesus. And here's why I'm excited about doing this series, for two reasons. One, I'm excited because we have a whole lot of new people in our church. Right? I mean, over the past couple of weeks, past couple of months, I mean, like there's a whole bunch of new people coming in, kind of kicking the tires a little bit, kind of figuring out, okay, I like this thing, so I'll come back and I'll come back and I'll come back. So here's what I know. If you're new to the church and you're kind of wondering what we believe and kind of how we kind of do church, this series is going to help you out. It's going to figure out kind of what we believe as a church. And then the second reason I'm excited is because we got a lot of new Christians in our church. Listen, we got a lot. Since we started the church, a year and a half, with the one salvation this morning at 9:30, in a year and a half, we've seen 117 people accept Christ. Dude, that's stinking incredible. Like I need you to understand that just doesn't happen everywhere. Like you're a part of something, that God's doing something in people's lives. And because of that, as a new Christian, man, you need a good foundation. Right? And that's what the book of Galatians is. It's really just a book that gives you a good foundation to stand on, right? And you know that's important. Like if you build a house, right, you need a good foundation to withstand your house, right? If you want a strong house, you want it to withstand the storms and stand for years and years and years, you need a good foundation. But if you don't have a good foundation, what's going to happen to your house? It's going to fall down. You remember the three little pigs? Okay. Right? So there's like a biblical story on that too, but I went with like the children's book. But you need a good foundation to kind of sustain a growing life. Y'all getting me distracted. Listen better and we'll move on, right? That's awesome. So let me kind of set up the whole deal, kind of tell you where we're going today and tell you where we're going for the next 6 weeks. Now, what you need to understand is that over the next 6 weeks, it's going to be kind of a little bit more teachy than preachy. But y'all good with that? Can we do that for just a little while? So we're going to dive in. We're going to teach about some stuff and hopefully grab some stuff that can be foundational to our walk with Jesus. So if you got a Bible, Galatians chapter 1, we're going to start in verse 1, like at the very beginning. Like I got to set this tone, kind of tell you kind of what Paul was thinking when he wrote this book. So Galatians chapter 1, if you don't have a Bible minute, it's going to be up here on the screen for you as well. Galatians chapter 1, verse 1. It says, Paul, an apostle, sent not from men nor by a man, but by Jesus Christ and God the Father. So right there, you kind of get the sense. Listen, Paul didn't just get some information, some secondhand information. Like what Paul got, what he's writing right here, he actually got from Jesus. It's like direct revelation to Paul. So he says, I'm not sent here by a man, I'm sent here by Jesus and God the Father, who raised him from the dead, and all the brothers and sisters with me, to the churches in Galatia. Now that's important, and we'll come back to that in just a second. So hold that in the back of your mind. To the churches in Galatia, grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ, who gave himself for our sins to rescue us from the present evil age, according to the will of our God and Father, to whom be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Now, the key thing was to the churches at Galatia, right? So what I need you to get is that this letter that we're about to dive into, it was a letter that Paul wrote to a certain church, right? To certain situations, to certain struggles, to certain people in that church dealing with some of the stuff that they're dealing with. But what I want you to see this morning is that even though this was a letter written thousands and thousands of years ago to a specific church, talking about specific things, it still relates today. Listen, some people say the Bible doesn't relate and the Bible's boring. No, you're boring, right? You just need to read the Bible, right? It relates to your life. Like it just happens. So he wrote this to the churches in Galatia. Now, Galatia was like a region in what we would say is modern-day Turkey. Right? So what Paul would do is he would go around all of that area and he would just start and plant churches. So he would go and he'd plant a church and he'd grow it up a little bit, get some people, grow up some leaders, give them the church, and he would move on somewhere else. He'd plant a church, grow up some people, grow up some leaders, move along and plant another church. And the way that he kind of kept in contact with these churches is through these letters. Right? And that's what a lot of the New Testament is. That's what a lot of the New Testament books are. They're letters, especially the ones that Paul wrote. They're letters to certain groups of people and to certain churches. So to understand where we're going, you got to understand that he was writing this book to a certain church, to certain churches in this region of Galatia. Now what's happening, and the reason why he's writing this book, is because what Paul would do is he would come in and he would try to lay a good foundation. Right? Because you need a good foundation. So he would start telling everybody, hey, listen, I need you to know that salvation is by faith in the grace of Jesus. Like that's salvation. That's what that is. That's foundational. You have to get this. So he lays that out to them. Salvation is by faith in the grace of Jesus. Jesus didn't have to do what he did, but he did it so that you could have salvation, and it's only by your faith in what Jesus did that actually gets you salvation. So that's foundational. But what happened is that when Paul left and he went on to another church and churches down the road, you had some, you know, those well-meaning people. I mean, they mean well. They're just wrong half the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got those people. So you had these people that would come in and they were behind Paul. Like, they were coming behind Paul and they were going, well, yeah, a relationship with Jesus, you got to have that. Like, that's foundational. But there's this other thing you got to do. Right? And this other thing that you do is you got to be circumcised. Now, today's going to be really weird for like a short period of time. And it's going to be really weird for you if you got kids in here that you're going to have to explain some of this to later. So I'm just saying, bear with me for a second. So this group of people that were coming in, they were actually Jewish Christians. So they grew up Jewish. They grew up in the culture of being Jewish. But then probably through a relationship with Paul, they realized that Jesus was the way. Right? So they had a relationship with Jesus, but they still had a little religion in them. You know anybody like that? Right? You know folks like that. They love Jesus, but they still a little bit of religion in you that's kind of just running around. That's kind of what they had. So they came to this church and they were going, you got to have a relationship with Jesus. Yes, but you also have to be circumcised. We know you're not Jewish, but you got to be circumcised. Now, how many of you know that's a weird conversation? Especially to a bunch of men who just made a decision to follow Jesus. Like, how many of you that would push you away from Jesus? Don't raise your hand, but I'm just saying, that's a weird conversation because these people actually wanted to kind of pretty much implement a surgery into the membership class. Like, you want to be a part of this club, you want to be godly, then you got to follow Jesus, but you also got to be circumcised. And I can just kind of feel that out a little bit. And a lot of those membership classes, I would say, would probably be female only. You know what I'm saying? Like, honey, I mean, I like the church, you like the church, you go on in, you join Formus, I'm going to go wait in the car. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is weird, it's awkward. So they're coming in and it's kind of like they're putting more things on the gospel, right? And Paul kind of throws this out, and this is what he says in verse 6. That's kind of what he's seeing. He sees that, and he throws this out. He says, I'm astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ. I love that. the grace, living in the grace of Christ. You want to know what freedom is? Freedom is living in the grace of Christ. Right? And Paul's getting to this point, and he's going, man, I'm blown away that you're walking away from freedom, and you're going back to this thing that's kind of holding you down and weighing on you and kind of putting you in jail, making you feel like you're in there and not really even experiencing freedom when Jesus actually came to give you freedom. He's like, I'm blown away by that. And this is what he says. This is the part I want you to pay attention to. He says that you're actually turning from that to a different gospel. To a different gospel. Now, I kind of got to thinking about this, and I was like, I don't, what is he talking about? But you can see this. You can see this in their life back then, and you can see this in your life right now, right? The different gospel. So I want to tell you kind of the gospels that he's talking about right here. So he's talking about like the true gospel, faith in Jesus, salvation comes by faith through the grace of Jesus. And then he's talking also about this different gospel, this gospel. Yeah, you got to have a relationship with Jesus, but you also got to do this. It's like John 3:16, right? For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes and, oh wait, no, it doesn't. It doesn't say that. Does it say that? I don't think it says that, right? Because that's not the true gospel. See, this different gospel that Paul was talking about, he was going, hey, listen, it's so heavy. It feels like it's so hard to earn God's love if you have all of these different rules and you have all these different do's and don'ts placed on that gospel. To which Paul goes, which is really no gospel at all. Do you see that? Which is really no gospel at all. So here, I'm going to set the two up for you really quick, and you'll know exactly where I'm going. So you have the gospel, which is no gospel at all, which is religion. Okay, now it's making a little bit more sense, right? And the true gospel is not religion, it's relationship. Right? So you have two gospels, and you have one that's the true one, which is a relationship, and one that's not really even a gospel at all. It's this religion. It's this going through the you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to stop doing that stuff over there. That's the religious mindset, and that's what Paul is dealing with. That's what he's writing to the book of Galatians, to the church at Galatia, going, hey, listen, I need you to see that this is what's happening. Like, you need to understand what's happening. So he tells them, look at the next verse. It says, evidently some people are throwing you into confusion and trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. Now that's what's going on in their culture. And I'll just be upfront with you and tell you that's the same thing going on in our culture. Like, we struggle with the same stuff. Like, we do the same. You want to be godly? You want to follow Jesus? Then have a relationship. Yes, I guess you got to do that stuff. But you need to stop smoking. You need to stop drinking. You need to stop sleeping around. You need to stop doing all that stuff. You need to stop your cussing. You need to stop doing. And you gotta have a relationship, but you got to stop doing all this stuff too. And it's like, hold on, that's not the gospel. Like, that's religion. So you get to this point in your walk, and you're wondering, okay, how do you live then? How do you live then in this relationship with Jesus and not kind of get sidetracked and bogged down in this other stuff? Right? Because here's what I know. Most Christians, they mean well. They just get sidetracked. And they lose focus. We lose focus. And we get bogged down into a whole bunch of junk. Therefore, what people outside of the church start seeing is not a relationship with Jesus, it's religion. And they start going, you know what, I don't like religion. And some of you may be here this morning, you're thinking that same thing. You're like, I came to church because you have free donuts and coffee. But I don't like religion. Like, I don't like this stuff. Here's the good news. I don't either. And here's some even better news. Jesus didn't either. You know, he never had one real good, loving conversation with somebody who was religious. All through the Bible. All the times that he got upset and that he was kind of siding with people, it was never the religious people. He was always going, what are you thinking? Why are you adding stuff to the gospel? And that's kind of the same thing that's going on in the churches in Galatia, and it's the same thing that we struggle with today, is how do you deal with that relationship? How do you do that? How do you do that? Because if we live in this religious mindset, then it's all about what we do. Right? It's all about how you can earn your way to God, how you can earn God's love. And if you can't do enough to earn God's love, then you just need to stop trying. And really, that's probably why people stop going to church. And that's why people don't want anything to do with Jesus, is because they figured out, hey man, I can't do all of this stuff. so therefore God's not going to love me. And it just pushes them away from church. Let me tell you something about the Bible. When you read the Bible, you were never meant to do exactly what it says. And you're like, hold on. God knew you would never be able to do exactly what he says. That's why he threw it out there. He says, you'll never be able to do it all. That's why you need me. But when you live in this religious mindset, you think it depends on what you do that determines the level that God loves you. And here's what I know. We discussed this last week too. The more and more times that you try to do something, the more and more times that you try to read your Bible and you fail. You try to pray and you fail. You try to go to Connect Group and you fail. You try to give and you fail. All these things, the more and more that you fail, the more easier it is to just quit altogether. That's why religion never makes anybody feel free. It makes everybody feel like you're in prison. But Jesus is going, that's not why I came. That's not the gospel. Like the gospel is never meant to make you feel like it was difficult. Listen, your relationship with Jesus is never meant to be difficult. It doesn't mean that you won't go through difficult circumstances, but your relationship with him was never meant to be difficult. It was meant to be easy. It was meant to be light. It was meant to be freeing so that you don't have to deal with all that stuff. Right? And Paul's going, why are you turning away from freedom and you're running back to the prison cell? Why are you doing that? And listen, it's the same question to us, is why do we do that? Well, we do that because we think that in order to get God to love us the way that he does, then it depends on what we do. But I want to show you something. It's never been dependent on what we do. Look at Romans 5:8. Romans 5:8, it's going to be on the screen for you. It says this, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this. Like, this is how God shows you that he loves you. Do you get that? Like, this is how God shows you that he loves you. While we were still sinners. Like, you don't even like to say that word, do you? And we're in church, we don't even like to say it. While you were still sinners, while I was still a sinner, while I was still far away from God, when I didn't even want anything to do with God, when I was still jacked up, when I was still messed up, when I was still sleeping around, when I was still doing drugs, when I was still doing, I was drinking too much, while I was still doing all of that stuff, Jesus shows us that he loves us how? While we, not after we quit doing all those things. While we were still sinners, what's it say? Christ died for us. Listen, if you don't get anything else, I need you to get this. Is that Jesus didn't wait till you changed to start loving you. He loved you so that you could change. You with me? Listen, you don't get cleaned up to jump in the shower. Right? I mean, nobody does that. Like, that's ridiculous. But somehow in our mind, in our religious model of church and relationships with Jesus, what we think is we got to get cleaned up before we can come to Jesus. I hear that all the time. All the time. Well, I mean, I've been wanting to come to your church, but I just don't think I'm there yet, man. I just got some stuff going on. I got to get my act together before I come to church. No, you don't. Dude, we're a bunch of jacked up people. How many of you got your act together? Nobody. So why are you here? Right? Because that's the mentality. I got to get cleaned up. I got to get everything together before I go to church. Before I can have a relationship with Jesus, I got to get all this stuff right. No. Listen, Jesus didn't love you because you changed. He loved you so that you could change. Right? His love for you was never dependent on what you did. I need you to get, God demonstrates his love for us that while we were still far away from God, while we were still sinning, while we still didn't want anything to do with Jesus, he died for us. He knew how jacked up you would be, and he loves you anyway. Right? And we get in this place and we feel like, okay, I don't know. I feel like I gotta be something. I gotta do something. I gotta do all these things. So in our minds we're going, okay, you gotta stop doing that. And you got to start doing this, and you got to stop doing that, and you got to stop cussing, you got to stop doing this stuff, you got to wear a certain thing. Come on, somebody. You've been around churches for a long time. Right? I remember the first time that I was asked to preach somewhere at a church. So I was really young, didn't know really what I was doing at all. But and some of you know me well enough. I'm like a jeans and t-shirt kind of guy. Like, this is probably as much as you're going to get. And I still am rocking the tennis shoes. You see what I'm saying? So I'm all dressy up here, but what you don't see down here is still I'm a jeans and t-shirt kind of a guy, right? So I was asked to preach at a church one time, and so I said, yeah, I'll come and I'll do that. And I show up in jeans and a T-shirt, because that's kind of the guy I am. I don't want to pretend. I just want to kind of be who I am. So I show up in jeans and a T-shirt. And I show up in this church, and I already feel kind of awkward because I'm not really spiritual. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I have a hard time hanging out with a bunch of pastors. Like, I'd lots rather hang out with people who are jacked up and messed up instead of a whole bunch of pastors. You know, like, I have a hard time being that. So I'm walking around going, I don't know what to do with my hands. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. But I've been around church enough, and I've been around enough pastors that I know what I should have been doing. So I was like, you know what? I got to find me an office. Got to find me an office. Got to pray for about 30 minutes before this message starts. Got to look through my notes a little bit, you know. So I find an office, and I kind of go through the motions, you know what I'm saying? Kind of doing that whole deal. And the pastor of the church comes in, and he's kind of walking me through the service, right? Kind of asking some questions. You good? You need anything? You ready? Everything going to be, you got everything together. And then he leaves me with one question. Like minutes before I'm supposed to go out and preach to this church. Like the first time in big church, you know what I'm saying? Like I talked to a bunch of kids for years, but like this is the first time in big church. So it's like the moments before I come out. It's like the speech before you run out of the tunnel kind of a deal. And he leaves me with this question. He says, you gonna wear that? And I go, yeah, it's what I got on. I could go shirtless. That might be good. That would be entertaining. Some people could come to Jesus because of that, but I'm pretty sure more of them would be deterred. Like it just wouldn't work. But see, it's so easy for us to lose focus on the gospel, the true gospel, and start turning back to a different gospel. So instead of, man, I've been praying for you all week. Man, I know that God's going to do something special. Instead of going, man, I know, I'm praying that God will show up and change people's lives from what he gave you to talk to us about tonight. Instead of that, it was, you going to wear that stuff? And it's the same way in our life every single day. And you have these gospels to choose from. Are you going to choose from the relationship, or are you going to choose to live from religion? Are you going to choose to live from a relationship with Jesus? Man, it's faith in Jesus. Or are you going to live going, you know what, I gotta measure up. I gotta live a certain way. I gotta do a certain thing, and I gotta do all this stuff. And which one are you going to live from? Because here's what it never fails. Never fails. You start talking about something like this in church, and you start talking about it's not really based on what you do. It's based on faith in Jesus. You start talking about that, and there's always a group of people. They go, well, Eric, I guess that's true. But just because it doesn't really have anything to do with you doesn't mean you shouldn't do stuff. Like you should pray, and you should read, and you should give, and you should serve, and you should stop doing all that stuff over there, and you should stop doing. And listen, I'm not telling you shouldn't do all those things. But what I want to bring out to you today is the heart behind why you do those things. It's because, listen, me and you can both do the same thing and have two different hearts on why we're doing it. And you can live out of a relationship with Jesus and live in freedom and trust in him to be everything that he said he would be to you, and you can have a relationship with Jesus. Or you can have a relationship with Jesus. I'm not saying that you're dying and going to hell. You can have a relationship with Jesus, but you can be so focused on every other thing that you lose focus on the one thing that we should be focused on anyway. So it's all about your heart, right? It's all about your heart. And I want to show this to you really quick. John 14:15. John 14:15. This is Jesus. Jesus is talking to his disciples. He's pretty much saying the same thing to me and you, right? He's talking to us today, and he says this. He says, if you love me, you'll obey what I command. Now for years I read this from the wrong gospel. You with me? For years I read this verse from the wrong gospel. I'm going, hey, Eric, if you love me, then you'll do whatever you got to do to prove to me that you love me by doing all of these things right here. So I'm trying to do all these things, and I keep failing, and I try to do it, and I fail, and I try to do it, and I fail, and I try to do it, and I fail, and I'm living in this jail cell, in this prison, thinking, God can't love me because I can't even do what he asked me to do. But I need you to know that's not what this verse says. It's not what the verse says. Look at the verse. It says, if you love me, you will. Do you get that? If you love me, you will. Don't necessarily focus on all my commandments. Just love me. And you will. Like, if you love me, if you fall in love with Jesus, you'll want to do what he says. See, here's what I need you. I don't need you to be here and be religious. Okay, and that sounds harsh, but listen, I don't need you to be here and be religious because I know somebody who's been hurt by church for years is stepping in this door next weekend, and they're looking for a place that will accept them and love them right where they are, no matter what they've done. They're giving church one more shot. And listen, if we're going to be that church, they're giving people I'm going to give this church one more shot. If this church is just like all the other ones, then I'm done. I'm done with this whole deal. Then that's why I don't need you to be religious. I don't need you to be religious. I need you to be in love with the person who gave his life for you so that he could give you life and new life and freedom in your life so that you're not in this prison anymore. You don't have to amount to anything. You already are. You already are. So listen, we can't be religious. Jesus didn't die for us to be religious because in religion, you're in prison and you never experience freedom. And Jesus died to set you free. And that comes from relationship. Listen, I'll boil this down to like practically how you live this out. Like my wife, Cheyenne. I mean, like she's smoking hot, by the way. And this is the service we record, so that's. But here's the deal. Like I never struggle with this. Like I never like get up in the morning and throw my feet off the bed and I'm sitting there on the bed and I'm going, you know what, Eric, you got to be faithful to your wife one more day. You got to psyching myself up, you know what I'm saying? You got to be faithful to Cheyenne one more day. You just got to be faithful, you know what I mean? So you're slapping your eyes a little bit and you're going, hey, you shouldn't look around. Like don't look around. Like you got to be faithful and you're hitting your hands. You can't touch it. Like don't do it. And remember, there's a commandment that says you shouldn't commit adultery. And because you shouldn't commit adultery, like you should base all of that on the commandment. No, see, I don't do that. You know what I do in the mornings? I slide my feet off the bed and I just love Cheyenne. Because see, when I just love Cheyenne, I don't struggle with having to be faithful. Because I'm in love with the person who I'm in relationship with. And listen, we try to make this stuff so spiritual. We try to make it so heavy and so high, our relationship with Jesus. We try to go, oh my gosh, you just got to be at a whole nother level. You know, H&L, whole nother level. You got to be on a whole nother level to attain this relationship. No. It's just like your relationships right now. Listen, God created relationships. So how did he create you to have relationship with other people and not make it a parallel to your relationship with him? See, if you just love God, and you just fall in love with him, you'll do exactly what he says. You'll do what he says. Not out of a heart of, I have to, but out of a heart of, I want to. I want to take Cheyenne out. I want to spoil her. I want to buy her gifts. I want to take her to the beach. I want to do all those things because I love her, not because I have to. Do you see the difference between the gospels? Listen, this religion gospel is you're living for God's approval. And this relationship gospel, the one that's actually the true gospel, is you're living from God's approval. Listen, I don't have to wonder if I'm approved by God. You see, because I made a decision to believe that what Jesus did on the cross was for me, and he took everything I did and everything I was on his back, and he died in my place, and he went to the grave, and he rose from the grave, defeating sin and death, and therefore I place my faith in him. So because I place my faith in him, I live from God's approval. I don't have to live for God's approval because I'm already approved. That's the difference between your two gospels. Is one, you're living from approval, and the other one, you're living for God's approval. So I'm going to give you this one-liner, your message in a sentence, and then we're closing this thing out right here. So I need you to hear what you're about to hear, okay? Go ahead and throw it up for him right there. The gospel isn't you did. The gospel is Jesus did. If you can just take one thing and kind of embed it in your mind, the gospel isn't you did. It's not about what you did. It's not about how good you are. Jesus didn't come because you were awesome. He came because you were messed up. And he knew that you couldn't achieve what needed to be achieved so that you could have a relationship with God. So he came and he did something so that you wouldn't have to live in prison, so that you could live in freedom. So if you can leave today getting one thing from the book, Galatians chapter 1, it's this right here. The gospel isn't you did. The gospel is Jesus did.